What did your child do when they saw someone being mean to their mom? I was putting the finishing touches on a unicorn birthday cake for my neighbor Jane's daughter Cassie, who was turning 7 and had terminal brain cancer. Jane begged me to make it special since this was likely Cassie's last birthday, so I'd spent 20 hours getting every detail perfect. The horn was hand-molded, the mane had 7 different colors of buttercream, one for each year of her life. I'd just finished placing the final touch of edible glitter when my phone buzzed. It was Jane. Just saw what you're doing to that cake. It looks like a diseased horse with a traffic cone on its head. My daughter is going to cry. You've ruined her last birthday. I stared at my phone in complete shock. Before I could process it, my 11-year-old son Jake came into the kitchen for a snack. What's wrong? I showed him the text. His face went from confused to hurt to angry. But Mom, you worked all night on this. He looked at the cake, then back at the phone. It's beautiful. You made it for free. Why would she say that? My eyes were filling with tears. I don't know, baby. I sat down heavily and my tears started falling. Maybe she's right. Maybe it is ugly. Mom, stop. Jake came over and hugged me tight. This is the most beautiful cake I've ever seen. Cassie's going to flip out when she sees it. He pulled back and looked at me seriously. Jane's doesn't get to be mean because she's upset. I wiped my eyes. You're right, but I promised she'd like it. Then we make sure Cassie likes it, not Jane. Jake started walking around the cake. Mom, Cassie told me at the hospital she dreams about unicorns. Let's make this cake so incredible it's like her dream came true. Before I could say no, Jake pulled out supplies. Remember those edible flowers you made last week? The roses? He found them in the fridge. These would look perfect around the bottom. Despite myself, I stood up to look. Those might be too much. Mom, if this might be Cassie's last birthday cake, there's no such thing as too much. He carefully placed one, and it did look beautiful. A tiny smile tugged at my lips. See? You're smiling, Jake said triumphantly. Now what about that shimmer dust? He found my special pearl dust. This would make it look magical. He started dusting the unicorn's horn, and it began to shimmer like it was made of actual magic. I couldn't help but laugh a little. You're getting it everywhere. Good. Cassie loves sparkles. She told me they make her forget she's sick. Jane texted. I just saw what you did. I actually think it's nice now. I'm sorry, I'll take the cake. Jake saw me reaching for the phone. Mom, no. She called it a diseased horse. We don't answer mean people. We spent the next hour together, Jake making me laugh as he narrated in a silly voice. And now the magical unicorn gets beautiful butterfly friends to watch over Cassie. I found myself genuinely enjoying decorating. What if we add some clouds around the bottom? I suggested. Yes, Jake said. With the cotton candy technique you showed me. Jane's texts kept coming. The party is in 2 hours. I need that cake. Cassie's energy is fading. I'm sorry for what I said. Please, I love what you're doing to it now. Jake read them and looked at me. She's not really sorry. She's using Cassie being sick to manipulate you. He was right. But Mom, you know what would be really funny? If we brought it right when all the parents are there? I hesitated. That seems... Mom, she insulted your art. Your ART. The thing you love most. Everyone should see what you did for Cassie. Jane called 5 times. Jake declined every call. Let her panic, I already texted Cassie that no matter what her mom says, the cake will be here. He said with a mischievous grin that made me actually laugh out loud. Jake, what? She made you cry. An hour before the party, we carefully boxed the now spectacular cake. I was actually proud of it again thanks to Jake. Mom, your eyes are sparkling again, he said, like they do when you're really happy about something you made. As we carried it to the car, we could see Jane watching from her window. Jake waved cheerfully. She looks stressed, he observed. Good, I said, then caught myself. I shouldn't say that. Mom, you're allowed to be mad at mean people. We waited until we could hear the party in full swing. Jake insisted on carrying the cake. I want everyone to know my mom made this. We walked through the backyard gate. The cake! Cassie called weakly from her special chair, then found the strength to stand up. We set it on the table and unveiled it. The entire party gasped. It's the most beautiful cake in the whole world! Cassie shrieked with more energy than she'd had in weeks. Look at the butterflies! Look at the sparkles! Parents surrounded us, phones out. This is incredible! Jane, where did you order this? This must have cost a fortune. Jane stood frozen as Cassie hugged me tight around the waist. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's even better than I dreamed. One parent looked closer at the detail work. Wait, this is handmade? You made this? Before I could answer, Jake announced proudly, my mom spent 20 hours on it. For free. As a favor. For Cassie's special day. The backyard went quiet except for Cassie still squealing about her cake. 20 hours? Someone repeated. For free? All eyes turned to Jane. Cassie was touching each butterfly. Mommy, you said it might be ugly, but it's the prettiest cake ever. Jane's face was red. I never said ugly, but then she saw several parents exchanging looks. She forced a huge smile. Time for cake. She grabbed the knife, her hand trembling with rage, staring directly at me as she held it over my creation. What she did next made me realize she was willing to ruin Cassie's last birthday to avoid the embarrassment. She pressed the knife down hard and started sawing back and forth across the perfect fondant, while staring straight at me with this weird smile on her face. The blade wasn't even cutting clean because she was pushing too hard, and the fondant was tearing in jagged chunks. Parents around us were shifting uncomfortably, and I could see two moms recording with their phones held low by their hips. Cassie's little voice broke through the awful silence, asking why Mommy wasn't cutting the cake right, and could she please wait, so everyone could sing first. Jane's hand froze mid-saw, and her knuckles went white around the knife handle as she looked between her daughter and all the watching parents. A woman I recognized from the school pickup stepped forward smoothly and reached for the knife with this big, friendly smile. "Let's all sing happy birthday first for the birthday girl," Francesca Floyd said in this bright voice, while gently prying the knife from Jane's grip. Jane's fingers didn't want to let go at first, and there was this tiny struggle that everyone pretended not to see. Her face went from pale to deep red as Francesca set the knife down on the table and started clapping to get everyone singing. The parents all joined in quickly and loudly like they were trying to cover up what just happened with the knife. Cassie pushed herself up straighter in her special chair, and her thin voice joined in singing to herself, which made a few parents tear up. She kept pointing at different parts of the cake during the song and telling the kid next to her about each decoration I'd made. Jane stood frozen next to me with her arms crossed so tight I could see her whole body shaking. The singing felt like it went on forever, with everyone drawing it out extra long to avoid what would come next. When we finally got to the last, "Happy birthday to you," everyone cheered extra loud, and Cassie was bouncing in her seat as much as her weak body would let her. Jane lunged for the knife before anyone could stop her and brought it down hard right across the unicorn's face. The beautiful horn I'd spent 3 hours molding split in half, and the rainbow mane got completely destroyed by her rough sawing motion. Several parents gasped out loud, and one dad actually said, "Jesus," under his breath, while Cassie's face just crumpled watching her magical unicorn get destroyed. Her bottom lip started shaking, and tears filled her eyes as she watched her mom hack through the cake like she was attacking it. I stepped forward fast and grabbed the cake stand to spin it away from Jane while keeping my voice super cheerful. "Look, Cassie, we're giving everyone the super sparkly pieces first," I said while quickly cutting neat slices from the already ruined section. Jake appeared at my elbow with paper plates and started making it into this whole production about who would get the most glitter on their piece. He held up each slice and announced how many sparkles it had while Cassie started giggling through her tears. Parents rushed to help serve, and everyone was talking extra loud about how amazing the cake tasted and how beautiful the decorations were. Francesca stayed right next to me the whole time and kept shooting these looks at Jane, who was just standing there with her arms crossed. Other parents kept coming up to compliment the cake in really loud voices, like they wanted to make sure everyone heard them. The dad who'd been recording earlier made this big show of taking close-up photos of the remaining decorations. Kids were running around with blue and purple frosting all over their faces, and Cassie had perked up once she got her special corner piece with extra butterflies. The party kept going, but you could feel how different everything was, with parents huddling in little groups and whispering. Some were showing each other something on their phones and glancing over at Jane, who was pretending not to notice. More guests started making excuses to leave early, and each one made sure to thank me specifically for the cake in front of everyone. Jane's smile got tighter and faker with each person who complimented my work before saying goodbye. As the last few families were gathering their things, Jane followed me into the kitchen when I went to get paper towels for cleanup. She grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt and pulled me into the corner by the refrigerator where no one could see us. "You did this on purpose," she hissed in my face, and I could smell wine on her breath. "You wanted to make me look bad in front of everyone." Her grip got tighter and she leaned in closer. "Using my sick daughter to get attention for yourself is disgusting." My stomach turned and I tried to pull away, but she wouldn't let go of my arm. "You think you're so special with your stupid cake, but everyone knows you just wanted the praise." Jake appeared in the doorway carrying dirty plates, and his eyes went wide when he saw Jane holding my arm. I quickly stepped between them and steered him back toward the living room before he could say anything. His face was all scrunched up with anger, and I could see his hands balling up into fists as we walked away. "Mom, she was hurting you," he said once we got outside, and his voice was shaking. That evening after we got home, my phone buzzed with a text from Francesca saying she got the whole knife thing on video. She'd been recording Cassie's reaction to the cake and caught Jane's meltdown by accident. Other parents were already talking about it in their group text and asking if I was okay after what happened. Francesca offered to send me the video in case Jane tried to twist the story later and make me look like the bad guy. I saved it to my cloud storage just in case, even though watching it made me feel sick all over again. Jake stayed close to me all evening and kept asking if my arm hurt where Jane had grabbed me. The next morning, I woke up to my phone going crazy with notifications from our neighborhood Facebook group. Jane had posted this long rant about certain neighbors who exploit sick children for attention and praise. She didn't use my name, but she wrote about people who pretend to do favors but really just want everyone to think they're heroes. The post went on about how real friends don't show up late to important events just to make an entrance. She ended it with something about how she knew who her real friends were now and everyone else could enjoy their 5 minutes of fame. My phone started going crazy with notifications right after I read that last line. Text after text popped up on my screen from parents who'd been at the party. Some were asking what really happened, and others were sending hearts and support messages. Jake looked over my shoulder as the messages kept coming. "Mom, there's like 30 texts already." I scrolled through them trying to read, but my hands were shaking a little. Francesca had sent 5 messages in a row saying Jane was out of line and asking if I was okay. Another mom from the party wrote that she couldn't believe Jane would say those things after what I did for Cassie. Jake grabbed my phone and turned it face down on the counter. "Come on, let's go walk around the block." He was already heading for the door. I followed him outside and we started walking down our street. The morning air felt good on my face. Jake kicked a rock along as we walked. "I want to write something back on that post." I shook my head. "Sometimes it's better not to respond at all." He stopped walking and looked at me. "But she's lying about you and everyone's reading it." We kept walking and he kicked the rock harder. Bullies get worse when nobody stands up to them. I put my arm around his shoulders as we turned the corner. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it. When we got back home, I checked my phone and saw a message from Darius Campbell, who runs our neighborhood Facebook group. He'd removed Jane's post for violating community guidelines about personal attacks. His private message asked if I wanted to file a formal complaint about harassment. I sat at the kitchen table thinking about it while Jake made himself a sandwich. Part of me wanted to file the complaint, but I typed back that I'd rather not make things worse. I asked if he could just post a general reminder about kindness and supporting families dealing with illness without mentioning names. He replied right away saying he'd do that and offered to mediate if Jane and I needed help working things out. Later that afternoon at the school pickup, I stood in my usual spot waiting for Jake. Some parents wouldn't look at me and turned away when I walked up. Others came right over and made a point of being extra friendly and asking about my cake business. The mom standing next to me whispered that she'd seen the Facebook drama before it got deleted. I could see groups of parents talking and glancing my way. When Jake came out, he was walking fast with his head down. He got in the car and slammed the door. On the drive home, he told me what happened. "This kid in my class said your cake looked like a diseased horse." His voice was getting louder. He kept saying it at recess, so I pushed him. My stomach dropped. "Jake, you can't push people." He crossed his arms and stared out the window. He wouldn't stop saying it. The school had already left a voicemail about meeting with the principal tomorrow morning. That night after dinner, I sat at my computer trying to write a message to Jane. I wanted to tell her to keep our problems between us and not let it affect our kids. I kept deleting and starting over. The first version was too angry. The second one sounded too weak. The third one was too long. I was on my 6th try when my phone buzzed. Jane had sent a text. "I'm sorry for what I posted. I'm under so much stress with Cassie, and you should understand since you're a mother too." I read it 3 times. She wasn't really apologizing at all. She was just making more excuses and trying to make me feel guilty. Before I could decide whether to respond, another text came through from Francesca. She'd created a group chat with parents who'd been at the party. People were already sharing stories in the chat. One mom wrote about how Jane had screamed at her last year for bringing the wrong brand of juice boxes to a school event. Another parent mentioned Jane making a scene at the hospital when a nurse was 5 minutes late with Cassie's medication. Someone else remembered Jane posting nasty things about a teacher who gave Cassie a B on a project. I kept reading and more stories kept coming. This wasn't the first time Jane had attacked someone who was trying to help her. The pattern was always the same. She'd ask for help, then turn on the person helping her if anything wasn't perfect. My phone rang while I was reading the messages. The caller ID showed it was from the children's hospital. I answered and heard a man's voice. "This is Amos Riddle. I'm the child life specialist working with Cassie." He explained that another parent had told him about the birthday party and the cake I'd made. "Cassie hasn't stopped talking about her unicorn cake all week." His voice was warm and kind. "She draws pictures of it during her treatments and tells every nurse about the sparkles and butterflies." He thanked me for bringing so much joy to Cassie during such a hard time. That cake gave her something magical to focus on instead of being sick. Amos paused for a moment and then his voice got quieter, telling me Jane had been having a really hard time accepting Cassie's diagnosis and kept refusing the support groups and counseling services the hospital offered her every week. He said she'd thrown papers at a social worker who tried to help and screamed at the chaplain that God had abandoned her family. I could hear him choosing his words carefully as he explained how some parents get so angry about their child being sick that they attack everyone around them, even the people trying to help. My stomach felt heavy listening to him describe Jane's breakdown in the hospital lobby last month when Cassie's latest scan results came back worse than expected. Part of me started to understand why she'd been so cruel about the cake, but understanding didn't make the hurt go away completely. The next morning, I drove to Jake's school for the meeting with the principal about him pushing that kid who'd repeated Jane's mean comment. The principal's office smelled like coffee and old books, and she had Jake's file open on her desk when I walked in. Jake sat in the chair next to mine looking small but not sorry about what he'd done. I explained everything that had happened at the party and showed the principal Jane's original text calling my cake a diseased horse. The principal's eyebrows went up as she read it, then she looked at Jake with something close to understanding on her face. She said she'd already heard from 3 other parents about the party drama and agreed that the gossip spreading through the school needed to stop immediately. She promised to address it in the next morning announcements without naming names and would have the counselor talk to the classes about kindness and not repeating hurtful things about other people's families. Jake squeezed my hand as we left her office, and I could tell he felt better, knowing someone in charge understood why he'd gotten so mad. That afternoon, I was folding laundry when I heard loud knocking on my front door, and through the peephole, I could see Jane standing there with her arms crossed and her face all red. I opened the door but stayed in the doorway, not inviting her in. She immediately started yelling that people were talking about her all over the neighborhood and at the hospital and even at Cassie's school, demanding I tell everyone to stop spreading lies about what happened at the party. Her voice got louder as she threatened to sue me for defamation and slander, and said she'd make my life miserable if I didn't fix this mess I'd created. I took a deep breath and kept my voice steady as I told her I hadn't said anything publicly about the party, and that her own behavior in front of 20 witnesses had caused people's reactions, not me. She stepped closer like she was going to push past me into my house, but I held up my hand and told her firmly that she needed to leave my property right now, and if she wanted to communicate with me anymore, it had to be in writing only. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish as she processed that I was actually standing up to her instead of apologizing and trying to make her feel better. Jake appeared at the window behind me, watching everything, and Jane's eyes narrowed when she saw him there. She spun around and stomped down my driveway, her shoulders shaking with rage, and I watched until she disappeared around the corner before closing and locking my door. Jake came over and hugged me tight, telling me he was proud of how I'd handled her and not let her bully me into taking blame for her own awful behavior. We sat on the couch together and had a long talk about how you can stand up for yourself and set boundaries while still having empathy for people who are going through hard times. I explained that Jane's pain about Cassie being sick didn't give her the right to hurt other people, but we could still feel sad for what their family was dealing with. The next day, Darius sent a message in the neighborhood group saying he wanted to organize a meal train for Jane's family to help with the stress of Cassie's medical care, trying to redirect all the drama towards something actually helpful. Within an hour, 12 families had signed up to bring dinners, including some of the parents who'd been at the party and seen everything. I thought about it for a while and decided to contribute too, but anonymously, making the lasagna recipe that Cassie had mentioned loving when she'd come over to play with Jake last year before she got sick. Jake watched me cooking and shook his head, saying I was being way too nice to someone who'd been so mean to me. I explained that Cassie shouldn't have to suffer because her mom acted badly, and that sometimes doing the right thing means helping people who don't deserve it. He helped me layer the noodles and cheese, and we dropped it off at Darius's house so he could deliver it without Jane knowing it came from us. 3 days later, Jane posted a thank you message in the neighborhood group for all the meal support, saying it had been a huge help during a difficult time, but not mentioning the party or apologizing for anything. The comments stayed positive and focused on sending good thoughts to Cassie, and nobody brought up the birthday cake drama, even though I knew they were all thinking about it. That evening, Francesca called to tell me Jane had shown up at her house trying to get the video of the knife incident deleted from her phone. She said Jane had tried everything from making excuses about being stressed to actually crying and begging. But Francesca had stayed firm and kept the video as insurance in case Jane tried to escalate things further or spread lies about what really happened. I was at the grocery store a few days later when I turned the corner by the cereal aisle and almost ran my cart right into Jane and Cassie. Cassie's face lit up like a Christmas tree when she saw me, and she started bouncing in her wheelchair despite looking thinner than before, thanking me over and over for her magical unicorn cake and saying she still had dreams about how beautiful it was. Jane's face went through about 10 different expressions as she stood there listening to her daughter gush about the cake she'd called a diseased horse. And finally, she muttered a barely audible thank you before grabbing the wheelchair handles and hurrying away toward the checkout lanes. That weekend, my phone rang while I was cleaning up breakfast dishes, and when I saw it was Amos from the hospital, I almost didn't answer, because I figured it was about some fundraiser or something. He asked if I had a minute to talk about Cassie, and explained she had a big treatment milestone coming up and the staff wanted to celebrate with something special. He said Jane had actually suggested I might be willing to make some simple cupcakes for the occasion, and he promised he'd be there the whole time as a buffer if I agreed to help. I told him I needed to think about it and would call him back. But honestly, my first thought was absolutely not after everything that had happened at the party. Jake overheard me talking and came into the kitchen asking what Amos wanted, and when I explained, he got this determined look on his face. He said Cassie shouldn't miss out on something nice just because her mom was mean, and that we should do it, but with rules this time to protect ourselves. I spent the rest of the day going back and forth about it and finally called Amos back saying I'd do it, but only with clear written communication about exactly what was expected. He said that was totally reasonable, and within an hour I had an email from Jane with specific details about flavors and colors, and at the bottom was what actually seemed like a real apology for the party. She wrote that she'd been dealing with a lot of fear about losing Cassie, and had taken it out on someone who was only trying to help, and she understood if I never wanted to speak to her again, but hoped I'd still help make Cassie's day special. Jake read it over my shoulder and said it sounded better than before, but we should still be careful and make sure everything stayed professional this time. We spent Sunday afternoon working on the cupcakes together, and Jake kept coming up with creative ideas like making little fondant stars, because Cassie loved wishing on stars at the hospital window. He mixed colors while I piped frosting, and we actually had fun working side by side without any drama or stress hanging over us. Monday morning, we packed everything carefully in boxes and drove to the hospital where Amos met us at the entrance just like he promised. The pediatric ward had decorated the common room with balloons and streamers, and when Cassie saw us walk in with the cupcake boxes, her whole face lit up even though she looked thinner than the last time I'd seen her. She tried to get up from her wheelchair, but the nurse told her to save her energy, so instead she just kept saying thank you over and over while reaching for the boxes to see what we'd brought. Jane stood by the window keeping her distance, but when Cassie insisted she come, look at the cupcakes, she walked over and actually thanked us appropriately in front of all the staff, without any weird comments or backhanded compliments. The nurses took tons of pictures of Cassie with her special cupcakes, and she insisted on one with me and Jake on either side of her wheelchair holding up our favorites. Later that afternoon, the hospital posted one of the photos on their social media page with a caption about brave kids and the amazing community that supports them. The comments section filled up with hearts and prayers for Cassie, and lots of people asking about the beautiful cupcakes, and within hours it had hundreds of likes and shares. Jane even liked the post without adding any dramatic comments or trying to make it about herself, which felt like actual progress from where we'd started. 2 weeks went by without any contact, and I was starting to relax, thinking maybe we'd found a good balance when my phone buzzed with a text from Jane. She asked if I might consider teaching her some basic decorating techniques so she could make simple treats for Cassie's upcoming treatment milestones herself. The message seemed genuine without any manipulation or guilt trips, but I still felt wary about getting pulled back into her orbit after we'd finally found some peace. I showed the text to Jake and then called Francesca to get her opinion, and they both said the same thing, that it was nice Jane wanted to learn, but I didn't owe her my time or energy. After sleeping on it, I texted Jane back offering to make a simple video tutorial instead of meeting in person, which would maintain boundaries while still helping her learn what she needed for Cassie. She responded right away saying that would be perfect, and thanking me for being willing to help at all after everything that had happened between us. Jake got excited about helping with the video and spent the next few days planning out what we should include and practicing his commentary, which he insisted would make it more fun to watch. We set up in the kitchen with my phone on a tripod, and Jake acted as my assistant, passing me tools and ingredients while adding funny observations about technique. He'd say things like, "Now my mom's doing the swirl thing, but don't worry if yours looks wonky the first time, because mine looked like a tornado had a fight with a paint mixer." We recorded for about an hour showing basic piping techniques and simple decorating tricks that anyone could do with grocery store supplies and regular kitchen tools. After editing it down to 20 minutes, we uploaded it as a private link and sent it to Jane with instructions on what supplies she'd need to practice. Within a day, Jane messaged that she'd already watched it 3 times, and Cassie loved Jake's funny comments and kept giggling even though she didn't feel well. Then somehow the video ended up in our neighborhood Facebook group, because Jane had shared it with another mom who was planning her kid's birthday, and that mom thought everyone would benefit from seeing it. My phone started pinging with notifications as people commented about how helpful the tutorial was and asking if I did classes or could make more videos for different techniques. Several parents said they'd tried the techniques with their kids already and loved having an activity they could do together that didn't require expensive supplies or special equipment. The response was so overwhelmingly positive that I started thinking maybe there was something bigger here than just helping one family through a difficult time. Jane sent me another message with a photo attached, and when I opened it, I saw Cassie sitting at a table covered in flour and frosting with the biggest smile on her face. She was holding up a lopsided cookie that she'd decorated herself using our techniques, and even though it was messy, you could tell she was so proud of what she'd created. Jane's message said Cassie had watched our video 6 times and insisted on trying everything herself, even though her hands were shaky from the medications. She said her husband had helped hold the piping bag steady, and they'd spent 2 hours decorating cookies together, which was the longest Cassie had been engaged in anything since her last treatment round. Even though things with Jane were still complicated, seeing that photo of Cassie's joy made everything worth it, and reminded me why I'd kept helping despite the drama. The next day, Jake found me scrolling through the neighborhood group comments and pointed at one asking about classes, then grabbed a notebook and started writing down ideas for a decorating workshop at the community center. He drew little diagrams of stations we could set up and wrote supply lists in his messy handwriting, while I watched him get more and more excited about teaching other kids what I'd taught him. Within an hour, we had a whole plan mapped out with different techniques for each age group, and Jake insisted on being listed as the official assistant instructor on the flyer he was already designing on my laptop. I called the community center, and they had Saturday mornings available for free if we provided our own supplies, so I posted in the neighborhood group that we'd be doing a free kids decorating workshop in 2 weeks. The response was immediate, with 12 families signing up within the first hour, and Jake started planning name tags and organizing my decorating tools into labeled boxes for each station. 2 weeks later, we arrived at the community center an hour early to set up, and Jake arranged everything perfectly, while I mixed different colors of frosting and laid out cookies I'd baked the night before. Parents started arriving with their kids, and I recognized several from Cassie's party who gave me knowing smiles and thanked me for doing this. Jake took charge of the younger kids' table, showing them basic piping techniques while making silly jokes that had them giggling as frosting got everywhere. I worked with the older kids on more advanced techniques and watched their faces light up when they successfully made their first rosette or figured out how to blend colors. One mom stayed to help clean up and mentioned she'd been wanting to learn cake decorating, but classes were so expensive, then asked if she could assist at future workshops to learn from watching. By the time we packed up, 15 kids had attended, and several parents asked if we'd be doing this monthly, offering to donate supplies or help with setup. Jake was practically bouncing in the car afterward, already planning improvements for next month and suggesting we add a special project for kids to take home to their parents. The second workshop had 20 kids signed up, and I spent the whole week before baking cookies and preparing supplies with Jake quality checking everything and making sure we had enough for everyone. That Saturday morning, Jane walked in holding Cassie's hand, and my whole body tensed, but Cassie ran straight to Jake asking if she could be his decorating partner. Jane mumbled something about Cassie insisting on coming and sat in the corner while Cassie and Jake worked together, him patiently helping her shaky hands hold the piping bag steady. Other parents started sharing their own stories while watching their kids decorate, one mom talking about her awful HOA president, and another about dealing with a nightmare PTA member. We all found ourselves bonding over difficult people in our lives while our kids created messy but happy art, and even Jane participated by helping distribute napkins when things got too messy. After 4 months of workshops, parents had started bringing homemade snacks to share, and someone created a group chat for workshop families that became its own little support network. Darius showed up at the 5th workshop with his grandson, and watched how smoothly everything ran, then pulled me aside afterward to discuss making it an official neighborhood program. He'd already talked to the community center board about getting us a small budget for supplies, and wanted to feature the workshops in the neighborhood newsletter as an example of community building. The official recognition felt like vindication after everything with Jane and Jake designed professional-looking flyers on the computer that we posted around the neighborhood. 3 months after that awful birthday party, I found a thick envelope in my mailbox with Jane's handwriting, and my stomach dropped as I opened it. Inside was a 2-page letter, where Jane acknowledged how cruel she'd been about the cake, and how her fear and anger about Cassie's illness had made her lash out at people trying to help. She wrote about joining a support group for parents of terminally ill children, where she was learning to process her emotions without hurting others, and she apologized for the pain she'd caused. I read it 3 times, then showed Jake, who read it silently before saying she might mean it, but that didn't mean we had to be friends with her again. I wrote back a short note acknowledging her apology and wishing her well, but made it clear our interactions would stay limited to the workshops where Cassie loved coming. Jake continued being kind to Cassie at the school and during workshops, but we both maintained careful distance from Jane, who seemed to understand and respect the boundary. More parents started volunteering their own skills at the community center, with one dad teaching basic woodworking and a mom offering gardening lessons for kids. Jane eventually volunteered to do simple science experiments one Saturday a month, finding her own way to contribute while we kept our distance but stayed polite. Cassie's health stabilized enough that she became a regular at every workshop, always eager to try new techniques and proudly showing off her creations to anyone who would look. She'd become our unofficial mascot, with the other kids cheering when she walked in and helping her when her hands were too shaky to pipe straight lines. 6 months after that terrible party, I was setting up for a workshop when Cassie tugged on my shirt and handed me a folded piece of construction paper. Inside, she'd drawn the unicorn cake in bright markers with careful detail on every butterfly and flower, surrounded by hearts and stars. At the bottom, in shaky handwriting, she'd written "Thank you for making my birthday magical, even when Mommy was mean, because it was the best birthday ever, and I still dream about that beautiful cake." I looked up from the card to see Jane standing right behind Cassie, watching the whole thing with her hand pressed to her mouth. Her eyes were wet, and when our eyes met, she just gave me this slow nod before reaching down to help Cassie back to her seat. Cassie was still chattering about the unicorn sparkles as Jane guided her away, and I noticed Jane's shoulders were shaking slightly. The other kids were already grabbing their supplies for today's project, sugar cookies shaped like flowers, and I had to focus on helping them get started. Jake was showing a younger boy how to hold the piping bag steady while I mixed up more pink frosting. 3 parents stayed to help clean up afterward, and one of them mentioned she'd love to hire me for her daughter's birthday party next month. That night after dinner, Jake was helping me wash the workshop supplies when he stopped scrubbing and looked at me seriously. He told me the whole thing with Jane taught him that being kind to mean people wasn't about them deserving it, but about who we wanted to be. I almost dropped the mixing bowl I was drying because hearing that from my 11-year-old made me realize how much we'd both changed since that awful text message. The paid birthday party went so well that the mom posted about it in 3 different Facebook groups, and within a week I had 6 more bookings. I started scheduling private lessons on weekday evenings while keeping the Saturday community workshops free for all the neighborhood kids. My kitchen calendar filled up with cake orders and decorating classes, and I had to buy a second stand mixer to keep up with demand. Jake became my official assistant for the paid parties, earning money for the new bike he wanted while learning business skills I never expected to teach him. The workshops kept growing too, with Darius giving us a bigger room at the community center and a monthly supply budget. Jane brought Cassie to almost every session when she was feeling strong enough, and we'd exchange polite hellos and updates about the weather or school events. Today I woke up early to start on the butterfly cookies and rainbow cupcakes for this afternoon's party. Cassie turns 8 today, something the doctors said would never happen, and Jane asked me through Darius if I'd provide the desserts. I'm arranging purple butterflies around the edge of the serving platter, while Jake pipes grass along the bottom of the cupcake display. We're keeping things simple and beautiful. Nothing as elaborate as that unicorn cake from a year ago, but Cassie specifically requested butterflies because they remind her of that magical day. Jane and I will smile and nod at each other across the party, maintaining the careful distance we've built, both grateful Cassie gets another birthday, even if we'll never be friends again. Thanks for hanging out and wondering through all of this with me. It's really been a journey worth sharing together. I'll catch you in the next one. Like the video, it helps more than you think.